All right, welcome to the deep dive. You know why you're here, right? You want to skip the surface chatter and really get down to the nitty-gritty, understand something completely without that textbook wrestling feeling, and that's what we're all about. Today we are diving into the early years of someone whose name is practically synonymous with pushing boundaries, Elon Musk.
Exactly. And we're not just skimming the surface here. We've got a treasure trove of material, a really in-depth biography packed with firsthand stories and sharp observations to give us a clearer picture of what experiences and influences shaped this ambitious, sometimes hard to figure out guy.
Yeah, let's cark the headlines for a minute. Our mission is to unearth the crucial nuggets from his early life, the defining moments, the relationships that really mattered, and those sparks of insight that reveal his extraordinary drive and, gotta be honest, sometimes baffling personality. We're looking for those aha moments.
Absolutely. Those turning points that make you go, okay, now I get it.
Right. So let's start unpacking this by diving into some early challenges. And where better to begin than with his relationship with his father? It's pretty clear this relationship was that complex.
Definitely complex. It's pretty much impossible to ignore the difficult and intricate dynamic between Elon and his father, Elon Musk. The biography really paints a picture of a man who had a massive, often negative, impact on young Elon. This really stands out as a crucial early factor in understanding who he became.
Yeah, like that story of Errol siding with the bully who attacked Elon after a school fight.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. Errol's reasoning was, get this, that the bully's father had recently committed suicide. And that, coupled with Elon's, shall we say, tendency to call people stupid, which Errol even admits Elon did, was enough for him to actually side with the aggressor. Think about that for a second. Your own dad siding with the person who just physically hurt you.
And the impact goes far beyond that one incident. After Elon was discharged from the hospital, his father subjected him to an hour-long tirade, calling him an idiot and worthless. Elon just stood there and took it. His brother Kimball, who saw it all, still describes it as his most painful memory, remembering his father's completely ballistic reaction and utter lack of empathy. That kind of constant devaluation from a parent can really do a number on a kid. It can either crush their self-worth or, weirdly enough, drive them to achieve like crazy to prove their worth. Maybe that explains some of Elon's relentless ambition, right?
Yeah, like overcompensating, no compassion at all from the father. That's got to be a brutal environment to grow up in. And Errol, get this, describes himself as a charismatic fantasist who bedevils Elon to this day. It's loaded, right? Hinting at this potentially ongoing unhealthy dynamic.
Absolutely. And if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, these early experiences likely had a huge part to play in other struggles Elon faced, like, his difficulty connecting with people, his loneliness.
Absolutely. The biography mentions how much trouble he had making friends. And apparently, constantly calling his classmates stupid wasn't exactly a winning strategy for building relationships.
No, not really a social lubricant.
His mother even noticed that he became so lonely and sad after starting school. His siblings, Kimball and Tosca, they made friends easily, but Elon, he almost never brought anyone home. And that feeling of being lonely, very lonely, it seems to have really stuck with him. Later on, he said something pretty telling. I never want to be alone.
Wow. That really hits you, doesn't it?
It suggests that underneath all this drive and ambition, there's this really fundamental human need for connection. Makes you wonder, how much of his outward push to achieve these huge things is fueled by a deep-seated fear of being alone, isolated?
Right. A need to be part of something, to matter. But even with all that early hardship, we see these glimpses of incredible determination.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, remember that story about him walking for 2 hours across Pretoria when he was just 5 years old to get to his cousin's birthday party after being punished?
Most 5-year-olds would just stay sulking at home, right? But not Elon. He was told to stay put, but he decided he was going to that party no matter what. Even though he couldn't read street signs or anything, he just relied on his memory of the route from car rides. And he actually made it, arriving just as the party was ending. Talk about willpower.
And then, fearing another punishment, he climbed up a maple tree and flat out refused to come down. Kimball describes it as this fierce determination that blows your mind and was sometimes frightening and still is. These early signs of unwavering will are. They're really fascinating when you consider his later ventures. SpaceX, Tesla, the guy doesn't give up easily.
No, he doesn't. Now, let's dig a little deeper into that complex relationship with his father, Errol. Elon's mother, May, she accused Errol of physically abusing her, allegations he completely denies. He calls them absolute rubbish and says he's never laid a hand on a woman. But He admits to verbally abusing her after their separation, saying he would tell her she was boring, stupid, and ugly. He even cops to his own failings in the marriage, admitting there were always prettier younger girls. There's a very tangled web of accusations and admissions.
Absolutely. And then there's the surprising move Elon made at 10 years old. He decided to go live with his father. He took a potentially dangerous overnight train journey by himself and was reportedly beaming with delight when he saw his father at the station. He even slept in his father's bed that night. It really suggests a deep longing for connection, maybe even validation from his father, despite the earlier issues. It speaks to that very human desire for parental approval.
Yeah, that primal need to connect with your parents, even when they're flawed. But this period of living with his dad wasn't all sunshine and roses, was it?
Not at all. By 17, after 7 years with his father, Elon felt this overwhelming urge to escape. The biography talks about Errol having a split personality, jovial and fun 1 minute, then dark, verbally abusive, and obsessed with fantasies and conspiracies the next. His moods were totally unpredictable.
Yeah, Tosca and Kimball described some pretty disturbing verbal abuse. Apparently, he'd go on for hours, with Errol screaming at them, calling them worthless and pathetic, making truly scarring and evil comments, even preventing them from leaving the house. That's just toxic, plain and simple.
Absolutely. It really highlights the lasting damage Errol inflicted, despite any initial hope Elon might have had. That need to escape probably played a huge role in his decisions to leave South Africa and forge his own path. And that path was heavily influenced by his intellectual explorations, especially his love for science fiction.
Oh, absolutely. Science fiction was a massive catalyst. The Foundation series and that concept of the zeroth law are specifically credited as being fundamental to the creation of SpaceX. It's kind of amazing, right? A fictional framework directly inspiring real-world ambition to explore space. What do you think it was about those stories that resonated so deeply with him? The grand scale, the problem solving on a cosmic level, that vision of a future shaped by technology.
Those are great points. It's fascinating how these grand, future-focused narratives clearly resonated with him. Maybe they offered him not only an escape from his immediate reality, but also a sense of possibility, a feeling that he could make a real impact, a massive one. And it wasn't just epic space sagas that he loved.
Yeah, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was also a big influence. He said that it actually helped him through bouts of existential depression with its jaunty and wry tale and droll humor. He found it amazingly funny in all sorts of subtle ways. It's interesting to see how, alongside this intense drive, there's this appreciation for humor as a way to cope and engage with these big, heavy questions about life.
It definitely suggests a more multifaceted inner life than one might initially assume. And before he launched these world-altering ventures, there were early signs of that entrepreneurial spirit, even if they didn't quite take off.
Yeah, like that video game arcade idea he cooked up with his cousins. They did some serious planning, researched popular games, projected cash flow, the whole 9 yards. But it all hit a wall because they needed an adult to co-sign the city permits. And Kimball's assessment that Errol was just too hard of a human to ask says a lot, right? They ended up asking Russ and Pete's dad, who, let's just say, wasn't exactly thrilled with the idea.
That's a small anecdote, but it really highlights both his early initiative and the ongoing challenges his relationship with his father presented. But then, at 17, he made the pivotal decision to leave his father's home for good.
17 years old. After those 7 years living with Errol, he knew he had to escape. Errol's unpredictable personality, those wild swings between jovial and fun and dark, verbally abusive and consumed by fantasies and conspiracies, it was just too much. The biography even uses the term split personality, which really underscores how extreme and inconsistent his father's behavior was.
And this escape wasn't just him saying, "I'm done." It was a physical journey. He took a solo bus trip across Canada. That's a pretty bold move for someone that young. It speaks to a serious sense of self-reliance and a willingness to jump into the unknown.
Alone. At 17, that's a huge leap of faith, a real test of independence. And the journey itself wasn't without its bumps, right?
Definitely not. He lost his suitcase with all his traveler's checks and clothes, leaving him with just a knapsack full of books. Talk about a setback on his quest for independence.
What a nightmare.
Seriously. And trying to get those traveler's checks replaced was a real hassle. He later said it gave him an early taste of how the financial payment system needed disruption. And you can see the connection there, right? To his later founding of X.com and PayPal, it suggests that even these early struggles could spark ideas for future innovation.
Absolutely, a key link. But he was resourceful. He managed to contact cousins in Canada using his remaining change and ended up working on their wheat farm. Talk about adapting and problem solving in a tough spot.
Seriously resilient. And after that experience, he joined his mother and siblings in Canada. Life wasn't easy for them. They were living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment. Money was really tight. His mother, May, she even remembers crying over spilled milk because they couldn't afford to replace it. That level of financial struggle, it must have instilled a real appreciation for resourcefulness and hard work.
It's a stark picture of real financial hardship. May was working nonstop, juggling jobs at the university, a modeling agency, and as a diet consultant just to keep things afloat. Elon himself was working an internship at Microsoft in Toronto, and Tuska had a job at a hamburger joint. They were all pulling their weight, trying to make ends meet.
Absolutely. It was a family effort. And this period of financial constraint definitely contributed to his drive and his understanding of the importance of efficiency, of overcoming limitations. It also set the stage for his academic journey and his evolving intellectual interests.
Yeah, he found his time at Queen's University less than stimulating academically. It wasn't challenging enough. So he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, which offered him a pretty substantial scholarship and loan package. But even with that, money was still tight. His father wasn't helping out, and his mother was still working multiple jobs.
At Penn, his academic focus really sharpened. He had these long discussions with a classmate, Robin Wren, about, get this, applying physics to building rockets and his long-standing dream of going to Mars. Wren remembers Elon talking about it constantly, although, admittedly, he didn't fully grasp how serious Elon was at the time. That kind of early, unwavering focus on such a massive goal is pretty remarkable.
It is, and it wasn't just space that captivated him. He also became deeply interested in electric cars. He was poring over academic papers on battery technology inspired by California's electric vehicle mandate. He even said with total conviction, "I want to go make that happen." That kind of early articulation of such a huge ambition is pretty striking.
It really is. It shows how consistent his long-term vision was, even in his early 20s. And interestingly, his time at Penn also saw a shift in his social life.
The biography mentions him developing a taste for partying as another way to deal with emotional complexity, alongside his love for strategy games and encyclopedias. A fellow student named Deo Resi became his guide in this new social landscape. It sounds like he was finally starting to come out of his shell a bit.
It does, right. It shows a more well-rounded development, learning to navigate social situations, finding a bit of an outlet from the intensity of his intellectual pursuits. This broader experience probably helped him become more adaptable in his later professional life. And then, of course, came the big decision about his postgraduate studies at Stanford.
Ah, yes, Stanford. He actually enrolled in a PhD program there, but almost immediately requested a deferral. His reasoning: he had come up with some software ideas related to early internet mapping in Yellow Pages directories and felt he had to chase that entrepreneurial opportunity. He even told a professor he'd probably fail, but wanted the option to come back if he did. That shows real entrepreneurial drive, but also some self-awareness and a sense of risk assessment. And as it turns out, the professor predicted, pretty accurately, that he wouldn't be back.
It was a clear sign that his entrepreneurial ambitions were taking over. And as he was starting to make his mark professionally, his personal relationship patterns also began to solidify.
His clash with Justine Wilson over Christian symbolism during a trip to Paris is a really telling example. She offered a spiritual interpretation of some tapestries they saw, and he just dismissed it as stupid, which led to a huge fight. She even noticed a disturbing parallel, saying that his dismissive language was like the things he told me his father said to him. That habit of shutting down other people's viewpoints by calling them stupid, it seems like it was a recurring problem for him.
It really does suggest the lasting impact of his father's critical and dismissive communication style. Even his close friends saw potential problems in his relationship with Justine.
Yeah, Kimball actually tried to talk him out of marrying her, expressing concerns that she wasn't the right person for him. And Naveed Farouk, who was there when they first met, also tried to dissuade him. But according to the biography, Elon loved both Justine and the turmoil. That's interesting, it's somewhat unsettling observation about his approach to relationships.
It raises questions about how comfortable he was with conflict and whether that played a role in shaping his relationships. But amidst all this personal drama, his entrepreneurial vision was starting to take shape.
His experiences, especially his time at Scotiabank, led him to believe that the banking industry was ripe for a shakeup. So in March 1999, he co-founded X.com. He was at a turning point, having just made a bunch of money from the sale of Zip2. And get this, he decided to invest the vast majority of it, $12 million out of $16 million after taxes, into X.com, leaving himself with very little for personal use. That shows some serious faith in his new venture and a willingness to take a huge financial risk.
It does, and building X.com involves some pretty interesting personality dynamics, especially his relationships with Peter Thiel and Max Levchin.
Yeah, that story about them having lunch at Il Fornello and one of the other founders, Harris, boldly marching into the kitchen because the service was so slow. And Elon, Thiel, and Levchin just exchanged these silent, knowing glances, bonding over their shared discomfort with that kind of extroverted behavior. It's pretty funny. And it highlights their shared personality, maybe a preference for a quieter, more reserved approach.
It definitely underscores the importance of shared values and personality, especially in the early days of building a company. And Musk also made a big change within X.com. He integrated the engineering and product management teams. This was a management philosophy he'd later applied to both Tesla and SpaceX. His belief was that keeping design and engineering separate was a recipe for disaster, and that engineers should ideally lead product teams. A model that apparently worked better for building rockets than it did for Twitter.
Levchin has a great quote about Musk's irony setting that goes up to 11 but never goes below 4, and his way of creating this exclusive Elon Club membership through shared irony. It gives you a glimpse into his unique communication style and how he created camaraderie within his teams.
Yeah, it shows his ability to build a sense of shared identity and loyalty within his teams, although through a somewhat unconventional and maybe a little intense form of interaction. However, his leadership style also caused a lot of friction and eventually led to his ouster from PayPal.
The turning point seems to have been a secret study commissioned by Thiel and Nosek. It clearly showed that the PayPal brand was much stronger and more valuable than X.com. Musk was furious and wanted to completely get rid of the PayPal brand from the website. By early September, several key executives, Thiel, Levchin, Nosek, Hoffman, and Sachs, had decided that they needed to dethrone Musk for the good of the company.
The biography says that Musk felt completely blindsided by this move, especially because it happened while he was in Australia. He sent out a really emotional email expressing his sadness and talking about the sacrifices he'd made, putting in every last ounce of effort, investing almost all his Zip2 earnings, even putting a strain on his marriage. It shows how deeply committed he was and how much it hurt to be removed from the company he started.
So for the second time in 3 years, he was pushed out of a company. The description of him as a visionary who didn't always play well with others seems pretty accurate. His colleagues at PayPal saw his relentless and rough personal style, but also his incredible willingness to take risks.
Yeah, Roloff Botha described typical entrepreneurs as risk mitigators, whereas Musk was into amplifying risk and burning the boats. That's a really insightful way to look at his approach to business. And Thiel later said that the successes of SpaceX and Tesla, which were seen as incredibly crazy bets, suggests that Musk understands risk in a way that most people just don't.
PayPal was eventually bought by eBay for $1.5 billion, netting Musk around $250 million. But even with that huge financial windfall, his conversation with Levchin afterwards is really telling. He simply asked, "Why did you turn on me?" It shows how much those professional conflicts affected him, even amidst financial success.
Absolutely. It highlights the emotional toll of these intense situations. And then, after all that professional upheaval, he had a brush with death.
Yeah, he got falciparum malaria after returning from that trip to Australia in 2001. At first, they misdiagnosed him with viral meningitis, which made things much worse. It was only when a specialist in infectious diseases correctly diagnosed and treated the malaria that they were able to save him. They caught it just in time.
He was in intensive care. It was
Yep.
a real confrontation with his own mortality, and the biography suggests that this experience had a profound impact on him. Shortly after recovering, he had a conversation with Adeo Ressi that would change everything.
He told Ressi that he had always wanted to do something big in space, but had always thought it was impossible for one person to do, mainly because of the crazy cost of building rockets.
But that ambition was clearly reignited. He realized that if he was serious about starting a rocket company, he had to move to Los Angeles, the heart of the aerospace industry, to be close to the talent and resources he needed. He knew the probability of success was low, but reasoned it would be even lower if he didn't make the move.
Interestingly, it seems he didn't fully explain his reasoning to Justine, who apparently thought he was moving to LA because he was drawn to the glamour and celebrity scene. In early 2002, he became a U.S. citizen, marking a new chapter. And then came his truly revolutionary approach to building affordable rockets.
His use of first principles thinking was key. When he was quoted these ridiculously high prices for rockets by the Russians, he didn't just accept those figures. He dug deeper, analyzed the basic physics and the cost of the raw materials. This first principles thinking means breaking a problem down to its simplest, most fundamental truths and then building your reasoning up from there. It's about questioning assumptions and not just taking things at face value. This led him to create what he called his idiot index, which basically compared the final cost of a product to the cost of its raw materials to identify any huge inefficiencies in the manufacturing process.
And he realized that rockets had an extremely high idiot index. The difference between the cost of the materials and the final price was astronomical. He calculated that a finished rocket costs at least 50 times more than the sum of its parts. This fundamental questioning of how things were done and his commitment to first principles thinking became a defining characteristic of his approach.
It really shows how he applied a scientific, analytical mindset to these complex business challenges, systematically finding inefficiencies and spotting opportunities for radical innovation and cost reduction. This was the true beginning of his bold ambition to transform space travel and reshape humanity's future.
So let's quickly recap some of the key things we learned about Elon Musk's early years. The really tough, often harmful relationship with his father, which probably left some lasting emotional scars and maybe even fueled his ambition and certain interpersonal patterns. We saw those early signs of incredible determination and resilience, like the 2-hour walk at 5 years old and refusing to come down from that tree. His intellectual curiosity, particularly his love of science fiction, really ignited his grand ambitions, especially his vision for space exploration. Those early business ventures, even though they weren't ultimately successful, laid the groundwork for what would come later. The messy exit from PayPal, despite the big financial reward, highlighted his visionary but sometimes abrasive leadership style and his appetite for risk. And finally, his near-death experience with malaria and his subsequent use of first principles thinking to tackle the problem of rocket costs led him to relocate to LA and eventually create SpaceX.
Exactly. Those early experiences and character traits, they're undeniably the foundation of the Elon Musk we see today. That relentless drive, that unconventional thinking, that willingness to embrace risk, it all goes back to those formative years. And like you said, maybe the adversity he faced early on, that pain of feeling alone and the difficult family dynamics, might have actually pushed him to achieve incredible things. Almost like he needed to prove something to make a lasting impact, to escape that sense of isolation.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how those early life experiences, the good and the bad, can shape a person's path and their impact on the world in these unpredictable ways. It's something to ponder even after this deep dive is over. Thanks for joining us.